T.O. Blaze. Hey there, this is T.O. bringing you another Kerbal Space Program video. It's been quite a while since my last video. Definitely haven't forgotten about YouTube, just been very busy with life, very busy with the pandemic and so forth. Actually, I got a lot of footage filmed over the last few months that I've been editing and saving up. Haven't had a great moment to record audio, and this is probably the best moment that I'm going to get. Audio might sound a little odd or different. Don't have an ideal space, and don't have my usual headphones, so I'm just going to make it work with what I got. Anyway, for today's video, building a seaplane, or built a seaplane rather, in my career mode. I sent a plane just like this to lathe, and it took me obviously a few iterations to get it to fly and to get it to float correctly, and to get it to take off from the water, which is a pretty big challenge. The water physics in the game, thankfully they've seemed to have changed them so that you can float and move in the water a little faster than you used to. The physics used to tear your ship apart, but now you can properly float. But anyway, there's a lot of drag on boats and planes like this, and it can take a lot to build up enough speed to take off. But anyway, here's my seaplane flying from the cockpit view, and I'm going to check out, there you see on the left there in the water, a ship that I built several months back, and I've been meaning to make a video about it. The Kerbal Space Program, as the name implies, is more about space than about building things back on Kerbin, but a lot of people do build ships and planes and submarines and all kinds of stuff like that, and I tried my hand at building a ship, which you're about to see in a second. Like I said, the water physics make it more appealing now to do stuff like this. So my ship is kind of like I guess a small frigate, you could say, or it doesn't have any cannons on board. It's got some missile pod launchers, which in this case are peaceful. They got some probes that it can launch to look around. It's got a helicopter on the deck. Everything that you see in this video except the helicopter I have assembled myself. When you get up close to the helicopter, you'll see if you've ever been on Kerbal X, I believe is the website, you can download crafts. They've got a lot of different neat crafts made by other users, and in this case it's the helicopter is from Kerbal X. It's an AH-11 Dragonfly, I think is what it's called. It's pretty cool looking. But anyway, everything else that you'll see in the video is stuff that I've assembled and launched myself. So the plane you saw leave the runway, that's obviously a typical way to launch a plane. The ship, on the other hand, there are no docks in Kerbal Space Program, so I had to build a big frame, I guess, for the ship to mount around, and it had big wheels. I had to go incredibly slow because there's a lot of mass, and wheels on Kerbin with a lot of mass don't allow you to go very fast before the wheels are torn apart. But here you see the ship. There's the Dragonfly on the front of it. There's a grabbing unit on the front of the ship. I included that in case I decided to refuel my ship. I've got the option to just fly out a giant fuel tank, drop it in the water, float up to the fuel tank and grab onto it, and I can refuel my ship. There you see it's got a command deck, got some antenna and a sensor there. There's the pod launcher on the backside. Two big jet engines. I found I couldn't get any other means of propulsion to function properly, but jet engines seem to work pretty well in the water. So I tried using different propellers, using rocket engines, but the jet engines work the best. So there you see, I'll get my Kerbal out. Is that Curvis? Nervous Curvis? My kids and I call her. She's gonna go and jump in the back. I've already got the back of the ship opened up, but obviously that closes. Had I thought about it ahead of time, I would have closed the hatch and had her swim up to it and then opened it so you could see the ship fully closed. But in this case, it's open. There's a little a dinghy, as I call it, attached with some pistons and a docking port. And here she'll have to get into the submarine. There's a mini sub. I didn't put any other doors on the ship. Although I don't know that ships typically would have a little door on the outside anyway. And here's a good view from the front. There, you see my space plane parked. You can see all the things. Here's a cockpit view in the front. We've got two Kerbals already on deck, a scientist and an engineer, I believe, or a pilot and an engineer rather. You can see all the lights on the decking. Not very big of a deck. Couldn't land anything other than a helicopter, I would assume. And there's a science module at the bottom. I got a scientist looking out into the depths of the ocean. I got our crew quarters with a cutaway view where you can see the inside overlay. And there's the inside of the sub, the mini sub. Again, the mini sub's docked with a docking port. The mini sub is able to expel enough fuel that it can become buoyant again. It's naturally going to sink on its own. I haven't perfected my sub design so that it can sink, ascend and descend quite like I want it to, but I can kind of make it work. There's a little crane on the back of the ship. That's if also I need other additions or parts or supplies. I could pull a boat up next to the ship and use the little grabbing unit and the pistons as a crane to lift things up onto the deck. One issue though I have with this design, the ship is not very stable. It tends to list left or right, in this case to the left. So in reality, I probably would never use that grabbing arm to put anything onto the ship, because the ship would probably just flip. And I tried different methods of getting the ship to sit more stable, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So at least right now it's right side up. A few times it did flip in the water, and it's quite annoying. There you see those big Goliath engines. I can activate them now, and just as a demonstration. I forget how fast. I think I got this thing up to 14 meters per second, and which is a pretty good cruising speed. And there, see now I'm turning the pod launcher, and you can see how it's causing the ship to rock left to right. So it's best to keep all the weight pretty centered, because the ship's not very stable. And there you can see I'm just demonstrating I can extend and release the dinghy and then retrieve it again. That's pretty simple. The submarine's not as simple, and the Dragonfly on the deck of the ship is definitely not so simple. I don't demonstrate the flight of the Dragonfly in this video because unfortunately when I moved it from a normal craft file to a sub-assembly, which you needed to do to put it on the ship's deck, it wiped all the action groups that came with the craft file. So I'd have to go and regroup the things. I just didn't feel like it for the video, but it is the normal craft file that you'd get from Kerbal X. So it'll take off vertically, and then at a certain speed the horizontal engines kick in, and then you can start flying forwards and backwards. But if I tried to release it from the deck of the ship right now, it would kind of just wobble and fall into the water without properly setting up all the action groups. Here's the dinghy in action. I found that the dinghy worked very well. It cruises super fast. You're going to see, I think in a second I'll whip it around the ship and take the dinghy on a little joyride. I'll use the dinghy to get my pilot back to the space plane. There's a pretty neat view though. Under the water, you can't even see the surface of the water. And there's this mini sub docked below the belly of the ship. Poop. And there she goes. Like I said, the mini sub is naturally pretty buoyant. I think it has an inclination to raise, not to lower. I had it backwards earlier. It doesn't actually descend unless you activate the engines and tilt down a little. So it's fairly buoyant on its own. The more you drive it, the more buoyant it becomes as you expend the fuel. But here you just see I'll take it down to the bottom of the water that we're in. It's deeper than I expected. The altimeter or altimeter, however you want to pronounce it, I think is accurate. It's well, if the camera wants to sit still long enough. We're pretty deep water, so it's going to take me a good hot minute to get down to the bottom. We got all the lights pointing down, so hopefully as we get down, you'll start to see the ocean floor. You do get some achievements in career mode the further you descend, which I think is cool. I think obviously they didn't intend for people to do a lot with boats and ships, so there's not a lot of. I don't think you can do any science or anything, but would be kind of neat. Maybe as an Easter egg if they would include that in a future update or in KSP2. Again, their focus is leaving the planet, not staying on the planet. But there are bodies of water on other planets, like Lathe and Eve. So, hey, could be worth it to invest some features that would encourage people to build more things like submarines and ships. So, this is not my first sub. This is definitely one of the smaller ones that I was able to get to fit inside the ship. But submarines are tricky in KSP. Most of the parts are naturally buoyant. Oh, there you go. Hit the seafloor. It's you basically have to find the densest parts and just stack those. So in this case, it's the one of them broke off actually. There you saw. It's the ore canisters, and they're full of ore. So they're, I think, the densest part in the game. So I've got a set of 2 or maybe 4 in the body of the ship, and then I've got 2 smaller ones in the front, 2 smaller ones in the back. And you can transfer ore between them. So if you leave a little extra space, you can start transferring ore as you need to balance the ship, which can be handy. So, yep, I left the submarine down for the sake of the video, just because, like I said, it's not easy to dock it with the ship anyway. So, you got a scientist just floating on the bottom down there. Here, got a Kerbal getting out on the deck of the ship. If the ship is moving at all, the Kerbal will just flip around on the deck until he falls into the water. The physics of the game recognize the Kerbal separately from the ship, and he's not going to just stand carefully on the ship. He's going to slide off it if the ship is moving at all. So let's get into the dinghy. I think I forget to demonstrate the pod that launches the little probe, so I'll do that later from the KSC. I'll just launch a probe from the KSC. It was a little tricky getting into the dinghy. I had to use some jumping and some I was just able to enter the seat from the water. But here you can see the dinghy, how fast it's going to go. I think I had to transfer some fuel around to get the engines to start, but there we go. Already almost going 10 meters per second, so about 20. Cruising in the water. A lot of fun. In previous updates or versions of the game, this thing would have just exploded hitting the water like this, but now it's able to float on top of the water. There's a pretty good view of the ship. The dragonfly on the front looks pretty cool. I tried building my own helicopters and hovercrafts and was a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, and couldn't get any of those to work. But here's the dragonfly. Like I said, something you can download from Kerbal X. Go ahead and show off some of the other things. Here's the dinghy. I think when I added the probe core to make it a subassembly, some things got shifted. So I'm going to take a quick second and try to fix that. I think the structural tubes, like the one in the back, is going to help me slide everything back into position. So that's how the dinghy's supposed to look. It's a subassembly. Somehow the original craft got messed up. So let me fix it real quick in case I ever decide to use it for something else. It's got some solar panels. If I were to leave it out onto the water, I could leave the solar panels up so it won't lose charge. Got a little antenna. Don't think I have any science experiments on it, but something that could be added. Here you can see a hidden reaction wheel down there. Couple lights. Pretty simple design. 2 engines. Those fuel tanks don't need to be full. With full fuel, I'd imagine this thing would have pretty good range. But that's a dinghy. I like the little antenna. It looks basically just for looks. Take one small battery. And here's the actual Explorer before it was launched. I call it the KSS Explorer 2. Explorer. I think the version 1 was basically the same, just heavily needed some modifications so it could actually float correctly. But there's the dinghy in the back, there's the mini sub, there's the engines, there's the giant wheels. I just rolled this thing out into the water as slow as I could and decoupled the wheels. So I think now I'll go ahead and, well, there's the mini sub, and this is the structure that I used to test the mini sub. When I just drove it out onto the water, released the sub, went on some trial runs, make sure it would sink and ascend and behave like I needed it to. I think I'm going to show you guys the little robot, the little probe pods. I think this is also based off of a craft file that I found, and then I just kind of made my own version and modified it. But you can make a really tiny plane using just the intake, tiny bit of fuel, the engine, and a couple control surfaces and a probe core. It doesn't take much to get something to fly. I added the little solid rocket booster just for fun. And once I'm up in the air, I ditch the booster. But you don't need the booster if you move that control surface far enough back. It'll fly straight from the ground like that. So video is kind of coming to an end. I think I've showed off everything. Made all this stuff for fun in my career mode. If you haven't tried building boats, ships, submarines, definitely worth the try. It's a lot of fun. Here I turned off my hood, trying to see if I can get close enough to the ship, and there it is. And thankfully it moved from the probe to the ship, so there's the last view of the ship. So hope you like this video. I've got a whole lot more in the pipeline that I plan to put some voiceover. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the video if you did indeed like it, and appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you soon.